we get started, Al?
Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah.
So, as Georgina was saying, thank you so much for joining us. We've got a bit of a conversation with you planned for the next hour and a half. But if you need to leave early, by all means do. Um, if this is not what you expected it to be, or if this doesn't fulfill a pressing need that you're sitting with, I'm sure you've got a lot of other stuff to catch up on just before Christmas. But it's very very nice to see you all. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy days, and I'm happy to be here with Georgina. We're both from the Team Coaching Studio. Georgina is the founder. I sometimes talk of Georgina as the light of Team Coaching Studio, and I'm one of the lamps. Um, I used to talk about Batman and Robin before, but I got tired of that kind of analogy. So it's the
Got
light
tired
and the
of wearing
lamp now.
tights.
Light and the lamp, George. Yeah. So it's nice to see It's nice to see, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of new faces. I'm sure maybe some of you have
Yeah.
met before, and some familiar faces too, which is really really great. I'm a Besides my work at a Team Coaching Studio, I'm an ICCS alumni myself. So it's really good to be back in touch with this community.
Yeah. Fantastic. And um we're huge friends of with Nick. So sort of we walked alongside Nick, been inspired by all that we've been doing at ICCS and and other enterprises. And it's just lovely to meet you and to get to talk about team coaching supervision. So just for a bit of context, we're practitioners. You know, there's quite a few voices, I think, in the field about um, team coaching who are academics or write about team coaching or research team coaching. All of that's incredibly valuable. Because what's different about us is at the end of the day, we're practitioners. We're interested in where the rubber meets the road and what the experience of team coaching is really about.
I think what you're trying to say in a polite way is that don't expect anything academic from us.
That's true.
Yeah.
And and we run training courses in team coaching that are really they're not so much starter courses. There are people who are out there practicing team coaching who've perhaps done their initial training, encountered the messiness of team coaching, they want to go deeper, and we provide supervision alongside that. So we have experience as practitioners in the messy, murky terrain of team coaching. We have experience of conversations every day with countless team coaches.
Mm.
So some of the kind of issues and some of the concerns, some of the things that keep people awake at night. And so that we can bring those practical lenses to it. And that's our hope today.
Yeah. And just to stay on context for a little bit, I'd love to know a little bit more about you. And we're going to make a bit of use of the chat
Yeah.
function today, if that's all right with everyone. And maybe a first quick question is, would you mind typing just really short, just using say low, medium, or MED, low, medium, and high, to indicate your experience with team coaching, and none is required, by the way.
Yeah.
But do
Good
you do
point.
any do you do any team coaching, or just low, medium, high? Low, medium, low. Okay, cool. Yep. And I know some of you here are not on camera. That's absolutely fine. Perfectly understand. Time zones, everything. Uh, we've got Joan from Animus or Joan from ICCS Animus with us here too, in the background somewhere. Medium, okay. Have ACTC, all right. That's the advanced certification in team coaching from the
Yeah.
ICF. Yeah, cool. And so if I were to ask your level of experience using that same low, medium, high in terms of team coaching supervision, I'm sure. Well, no, that's a huge assumption. I was going to make it. I'm assuming it's not going to be very different, but that's an assumption because some of you may not have a lot of experience as a team coach, but do a lot of supervision of team coaches, but low as well. Okay, cool. All right. So there's a lot we can share with you then today.
Great, thank you. And if you're still typing, that's useful. We've got some high, medium. It looks like generally some people maybe practicing team coaching, getting into it,
Yeah.
but less so on the supervision side. So thank you. That helps us contextualize it to, what's different about supervising team coaching, and what are some of the things to be aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we start there? That's a good question, actually, George.
Okay.
What is different from, you and I both started as one-on-one coaches. Then,
Well, Al, I want to interrupt you briefly.
yeah,
Just before we go there, I feel a need to say that at the team coaching studio, we have a particular lens on team coaching, and therefore that's likely to influence how we see it and how you'll experience us respond and talk about it. So some approaches to team coaching are more diagnostic and more, maybe diagnose the team, identify a gap, and then create modules or sessions to plug those gaps. And we're much more on the emergent side. We're interested in what's working in the here and now, and that may show up in our answers.
yeah,
Thanks, Al.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but I'm thinking, so all of a sudden that grow model came to my mind. That grow model that a lot of
Yeah.
us started out with in coaching, where the first thing you do is kind of figure out what the goal of the session is. And I think we work slightly differently in the sense that we trust the goal, or whatever, we trust the presenting issue to not be very clear at the beginning, but to kind of emerge as the conversation with the team unfolds. There may be a very clear presenting issue. There may be an agenda point. There may be, this is what we need to work on. But then more often than not, we're finding that the real value that teams derive from the coaching that they receive comes from things that were not necessarily planned, but that are much more important than what was originally thought we ought to be working on. That's what we mean to some extent by working emergently. Yeah.
Yeah, so you might get a brief, like, I might get an email or a phone call that says we've hired some of the best in the industry in this team. They're real experts in their field, creme de la creme. So why the hell can't they work together as a team? That's quite often the brief. So it's a very loose brief. They want them to work together, or they want to be one team or more cohesive. But what does that really mean? We don't know until we get into contact with the team. So one of the things we say is you need to get into the field to experience the field and to see what's really there. And a diagnostic is already creating a lens to look through a team at, and therefore precluding other things that may be there that might not be part of your diagnostic. It's already giving a model of what's right or wrong, or what's best or not best. So yes, this gives a sense of our approach. But one of the other things that comes up about team coaching that's really important is complexity. It's a word that's used a lot at the moment, isn't it? VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. I'm sure many of you have heard that, or variations thereof. But what does that mean in team coaching? When you think about it afresh right now, Al, how does complexity come up in team coaching for you and for the people you supervise?
Well, one way to illustrate it, we don't have many slides, and you'll get a copy of the slides, by the way. But we really don't have very many, just a few visuals to share. This is, I think, a beautiful diagram developed by Alison Hodge, and who we love dearly, and who does a lot of work in team coaching supervision. And she's tried to map the different factors to consider in team coaching. So this is one way to start to talk about the complexity of things. A complexity that is more present than in one-on-one coaching, and therefore in the supervision of coaches that do primarily one-on-one work. So you'll have this to look at in detail, but this is one way to start to think about all of the different big and small elements that are involved. But what's not on this drawing necessarily, and what maybe contributes to the complexity more than anything else, is the fact that in this is not what I'm going to say is not always true, but when you're working as a one-on-one coach, it's very likely that there is a commitment on behalf of the coachee to work with you as a coach. They may not, or it may not, the coaching assignment may not always have been their choice. It may have been recommended by somebody else who commissions the work. But after a chemistry session and maybe after a bit of work, there ought to be some commitment, at least on behalf of the client. Now, this is different in coaching teams. It's very easy to assume when you start to work as a coach with teams, or if you are working with clients that are teams or complex systems of any kind, it's very easy to assume that every member of that group or team has somehow fully bought into the value of the coaching. And and that may throw up a lot of unexpected kind of moments in the work, in the relationship between the client and the coach.
Yeah.
And may create a lot of uncertainty, may create more uncertainty and doubt for the coach who's doing the work. Why are they not responding? Why do half of them seem interested in the work that we're doing, but I go home at the end of the day and I feel that half of the people that the work we were doing didn't even land with them.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the things when I'm supervising a team coach, I really like to dive into where did the brief come from? Whose agenda is this really? Is it sometimes I tend to work at teams at the top, so I'll often get past the chief exec for a conversation quite quickly. But colleagues who work with teams in the middle, they'll often be HR as an interface. Is HR being the voice of what needs to change in the team? Or is the team leader the voice of where the opportunities for growth are? And so often I find that coaches are taking a brief from HR or the team leader and then designing a workshop based on that brief. So the coach hasn't got into the field. They've not encountered the relational dynamics. They're getting one or two persons' lens on it. And to do interviews, of course, is sometimes what other people do. That's problematic. It can be helpful, but it has problems because the coach is then the meaning-making tool for the interviews. You're the one listening, taking notes, and then sometimes coaches organize that data into themes and play it back as though the output is what's useful. But the meaning-making process is actually the most useful. Team coaching impact isn't generated from having diagnostic output. It's from how the team engage around that, how they create meaning together. So imagine instead of doing one-to-one interviews, if they were interviewing each other, or if they were answering the questions you'd ask in an interview together, or they were talking about it in pairs and then bringing that in. You're already starting to create relational contact between team members rather than through the coach as a hub. And this is the classic thing we find with new team coaches, is this sort of hub phenomena. When you see new team coaches work in the room, they'll ask a question and they work in and out through each person. So they ask a question, one person responds, let's say Tim responds, and you go, oh, Tim, I've heard you, thank you. Camilla, what do you think? And so on. And then they respond to each person. So they're building relationship between themselves and individual team members. They're making meaning, gathering data themselves. Whereas the real impact comes from when that meaning is made between team members. And this is a significant shift that often coaches don't realize when they're in the room. So where do you get the brief from? Be really conscious about that. You get the brief from the team leader, and it's quite likely that people see you there as the team leader's sidekick or hench person or tool. You're there to change the team in accordance with what the team leader wants. And you may get passivity as a result from team members because they're feeling more done to than really engaged, or that kind of adaptive behavior where I'll show up and I'll be a good team member and I'll participate because I want to show willing, but I'm not really in. And then this thing about fielding through hub and spoke and who's really generating the dialogue. They're two quite significant patterns I notice.
Yeah. So if you again, if we start with this as one way to start charting the complexity, there's the team coaching framework, the psychological phenomena, stages of group or team development, external influences, explicit and implicit, engaging the team, purpose of the intervention, the leadership of the team, leadership in the team, the stage of the coach's development, the relational skills between the individual participants, the relationship between the team and its wider stakeholders. And if you overlay on that everything that you've just said, Georgina, in terms of the interrelational dynamics, and people maybe not buying into this wholly, and and across the board. And plus, if you factor into this the fact that, as you said earlier, we tend to work very emergently as opposed to starting with a very, very clear structure and an agenda, as you would say in a facilitation kind of assignment, where you know what the different elements are going to be. That is going to create, that comes with a lot of uncertainty and an emotional impact on team coaches, which is by and large more important than any emotional impact we experience as one-on-one coaches. Give me a thumbs up or down or half if we're getting that point across. Those that are on camera, yeah, is that clear? More, yeah. So I think that's the starting point. So if I were to ask you, how would you describe that? The people here. Again, maybe use the chat box. But what fears or emotional undercurrents do team coaches bring to you in supervision? And again, if you're not at this point doing a lot of supervision of team coaches, what might those fears or emotional undercurrents be?
Or even those, we had a number of people reporting they're doing some team coaching because they answered medium.
Yes, yes.
What do you experience yourself? Or the emotional undercurrents that
Absolutely.
come up for you? Yeah, gosh, delivering value, that comes up so much. Yeah. What else?
Yeah. The drive to perform, the drive to add value, losing control. Yeah. Keeping face.
Keeping face, that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Fear of consequence and working as an internal team coach. Yeah, you're part of the system. Yeah. The expectation on you to perform is how I interpret.
Yeah.
Fear of consequence that you've put there.
Doubt, self-doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Expectations, right? Because all of a sudden you don't just have, there's not one person that you're sitting with, but there's a group of maybe 8, 10 or more people looking at you going, fix us. It's a lot of pressure.
Or the opposite of that. There's nothing to be fixed here. There's no growth available. There's nothing to change. We're all good. And yet you've been called in. Yeah. So there's still resistance coming in, proving impact with an initial session to earn the right to do a program. Yeah. Who's the client? Supervisor, the team, individual team members, HR sponsor. Yeah. Who is the client? Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot going on the emotional ground there. And this is where we find that so much of the work exists. I'll give you an example. You know, last week we run out once a year, or once or twice a year, a Gestalt team coaching workshop in person in London. And it's by invite only, because we only want coaches who can really bring in some challenge and take some risks, and who really want to get into practice. We bring in a client team, we practice with a client team, and see the change unfold emergently over the course of the workshop. We were there last week, that's why this is fresh in my mind. And on the final day we were debriefing, one of the themes that came up was, as the first person named here, about value. And I really, really want to add value. And one participant named that, and others around the room started to go into threads like, well, of course you could measure, you could do before and after ROI. You could get the team to describe the impact that it's had. They were going into solutioning. And we paused the conversation and instead invited the coachee who had brought that, the participant who had brought the question about value, to go inside and say, what do you notice when you hold that question of value? What do you notice inside yourself? What's here? And the answer was something like, oh, I don't want to waste anyone's time. I want it to be worth their time. And so we said, hold that inside you. What's underneath that? Peel away a layer of the onion. What's underneath that? And the participant kept responding. And we kept peeling away layers of the onion, saying, and what's underneath that? And for those of you listening here, what do you imagine, if it was you, what do you imagine might be right at the bottom? Where did the participant get to? What's at the core of the onion? It's like fear.
Fear of failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Self-worth.
Yeah. Rejection, lack of safety. Will I be liked? Will I be loved?
Yeah.
Being good enough. But as you can see, hopefully from that example, these things get presented as externalized ideas, because that's the first thought perhaps that goes through our heads as practitioners. And so we look for more concrete ways to fix it. Or maybe if I do ROI, that will generate value. Or if I have a better tool, that will make me feel I'm adding more value because people have learned content and I can prove that content. There's so much vulnerability involved. And many coaches, sadly, I think, coach teams one coach up rather than two coaches up. When they coach as co-coaching pairs, coaches have a partner. They can process both what they've noticed is happening in the team, but really crucially, what's happening inside me. When they coach alone, you as the supervisor might be the only place, the only tuning fork, the only place they can bring that vulnerability in order to process it. There's a co-coach that I've been working with over the last year, and we got to a point with the team at one point, this particular team, we were both feeling a bit hopeless and our energy was really low. And we were both almost hoping that the client would cancel the engagement, that it would run out of steam, because the system had got so much into us. This is what happens in team coaching. System gets under your skin. And we're experienced team coaches. So we were able to notice what was happening to ourselves energetically, and to notice that the team system was getting into us and that it's a parallel process. We were experiencing so much of the hopelessness that the team were experiencing in their environment. And that really helped us to recalibrate. And, if you have if you're supervising team coaches, you're working with complexity rather than delivering a workshop. You may have some who say they're doing team coaching, but what they're really doing is delivering, I don't know, 5 dysfunctions of a team workshop or a Belbin workshop or something like that. That's different because the practitioner has a lot of control. The intervener has a lot of control. And you can say, I've done my job because I've delivered this content. But team coaching isn't about content. It's not about filling up the head with theory. It's about transformational change. And it'll take us to the edge of your soul. It'll take you as a team coach to the edge of your inner experience. It'll slam back in your face your own withdrawal and contact patterns, because your family of origin is how you learnt to be in a family system. It's how you learnt to be in a social system. So, for example, let's say
your family as your first team.
As your first team. So let's say this has come up quite often. Let's say I'm a middle child and my elder sibling and my younger sibling fought. And over the years, I came to understand that my role in the family was to mediate. And that developed as a sort of superpower, my mediation skills. But I may be hooked or trapped in that idea, that paradigm of how I add value, and see myself as a need to mediate between two different opposing forces or ideas. That mediation can be helpful, but if I'm unaware that that's the role that I think I need to play in a social system, then it leaves me inevitably getting myself entangled in that system. I need to find something to mediate in so I can find my place in the system. The system team. Is that making sense? And this is quite complex. Yeah, thank you, Siobhan, for the signal. I appreciate that feedback. Yeah, so this can be a lot to process, huh? It's not necessarily going to come to the surface straight away. It might come out as, oh, these two people in the team, they drive me nuts. They're squabbling like school children all the time. One says red and the other says green, and we've got to get them on the same page. And what model or framework shall I use to get them on the same page? Maybe it's about values. Maybe I get them talking about values. We're already getting ourselves entangled and trying to fix that relationship. Yeah. So this is the complexity. So somehow, as a supervisor, it's very helpful to be able to have a place where the coach can process, who am I as a coach? What are my patterns?
Yeah.
What's my stage of development? How do I understand, for example, power and authority? That comes up a lot, doesn't it, Al?
And yeah, no, totally, power and authority. Because as coaches, we all have our own personal relationships with those terms and with those dynamics. Power. What does power mean to me? What's my relationship to power? How do I react in the face of power? Do I want to distribute power equally between everybody? Or can I adapt to whatever authority structure exists in the client system? And can I be comfortable with that? But yeah. I was going to go somewhere else, but now I think I forgot. So lots of uncertainty, lots of things that may surface. And I remember when I was going through the ICCS program. Hi, Mia. I think Mia was faculty there. And so one of the things that I was taught as part of that program was that 7I model.
Yes.
Does everybody still remember that? Have you guys seen that? Yeah.
Taught in almost every supervision program in the world, I guess.
Yeah. So. I know, as I've discovered since then. To me at the time it was new, and it looked something like this, right? That drawing.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to make sense of it. I found the drawing very... I don't know, there was, maybe you've seen slightly different versions of it. And to me, I felt very complicated on unpick it. Very useful to have those 7 eyes. And I know there's been other eyes added to this afterwards, but these 7. And so with my simple mind, I had to draw it like this for myself to start to understand it. As you have this love triangle between the coach and the supervisor, and then the team that the coach is working with. And I go, okay, well, that's 3 of those eyes. The coach's processes, the team, the client systems processes, what's happening what's coming up for the supervisor, and then of course the relationship, the red arrow here between the supervisor and the coach, as 1 eye. The relationship between the coach and the team as 1 eye. The coach's intervention, so the coach's work with the team, as another slightly bent red arrow here. And then, of course, the green box encasing it all, which is this somewhat larger context. So whether you're drawn to this way of visualizing it, or whether, like me, you're drawn to a slightly simpler way of visualizing it, doesn't really matter. There's still seven eyes here. Now, so as a supervisor, which of those 7 eyes do you think best supports the coach's emotional processes, the coach's emotional, that emotional impact on the coach that we've been talking about? And again, maybe that's something we can put in the chat. Or oh, thanks, Millie. Yeah, so which of those 7 eyes would you be are you drawn to, or would you be drawn to in supervising team coaches? And of course, all of them, right? But the interventions of the supervisor with the coach, yeah, an eighth eye. Yeah. You can even, we're a small enough group today. If you wanna quickly come off mute and shout out something, that's absolutely fine too. But which of the elements of that diagram would you think might best support, the coach's emotional experience? Oh yeah, and so right, Mia, yeah. Mia mentions the parallel process between the coach and the supervisor as reflecting something that may be happening in the larger system.
Yeah.
Yeah. The relationship of the coach with the team, yeah. And the relationship between the team members, yep. So it's a beautiful model to begin with, and then especially in team coaching, it takes on a lot of depth.
Yeah. And could say it's another factor is also about the level of vertical development of the coach. This is something that's not talked about so much, but if the coach's stage of development, like 80% of people in corporate life or more, their meaning making frame is as an expert or as an achiever, then that achiever lens is likely to be how they look at the coaching, or the expert lens. If my meaning making frame is expert, then it's highly likely I'm going to want to show up as an expert and take my expert self into the room. My research says this is the frame that you should be using, and it's backed by Harvard, and I'm going to bring in my authority and my expertise because that's what I value in others. If I'm at an achiever level of vertical development, then I may be very, very keen on having ROI and performance measures. I want to prove the impact I have had through my work on the team. And therefore the converse of that, you know, if I find a team, if I'm an expert and I find a team resisting this model that I've got trained up in, and I'm the expert in the XYZ model of team effectiveness, and I've paid £5,000 for the certification, and I've studied really hard, and then the team are resisting it, I may get really triggered. If I'm wired into achieving and the team are not making progress as quickly as they wanted, you know, they want to go from a team that barely meets, and when they do, they just report in from their functions, to a highly effective, collaborative senior leadership team, and they want to give it 1.5 hour sessions. You know, you're not going to do that transformational work in that program. But the team coach may not have thought that through, maybe very hooked into achieving and actually hurting themselves through this constant punishment of needing to achieve, or of becoming a critical parent to the team who are not achieving. So there's quite a lot of complexity here in to support and hold. And I like this question about which I, and I'm wondering if you're aware of which I, as supervisors, you tend to go to first. Do you go more to what's happening between the coach and, say, one of the team members? More to how the coach is intervening and the tool they're using, and what different tool? Do you tend to go more to, say, the characteristics of the team? Do you look at it more through the wider context? Perhaps you lean towards the parallel process and the felt sense. I think the value of this frame and is like all these things, is learning to broaden our lens, to know where each of us will have a bias, and to be able to look through more lenses. So for that, you know, one of the things we recommend is group team coaching supervision. Because as supervisors, we'll have our lens, our preferred lens. But if you've got a group of 4 or 5 people, all with different every coach in that group will have something different they'll see when the client brings a situation. And that way we're able to map out more of the complexity. Not that one thing that one person sees is right, or the supervisor is right, or one is more valid than the other.
Yeah, there's a comment in the chat of, you know, I love group supervision. And so do I. And then especially when you work with team coaches, it just makes sense to do groups, you know, to supervise team coaches as a group, because they work with groups and teams. They work with groups of people all the time. And so there's even in a supervision group, there's a lot of things that may show up in the coach's day-to-day relationship with their clients. You know, some very similar kind of dynamics.
Yeah. Yes.
And
yeah. You were coming in there.
I was going to, in the spirit of working emergently, George, I was just thinking, I don't know why I got this thought of asking you guys as a group here, is there anybody sitting here is there anybody in this conversation that is currently sitting with some form of a hangover from a recent piece of work that you've done with a group or with a team, and that you'd feel safe enough sharing? And then it'd be great to unpack, you know, and unpack that a little bit with us. There might not be, and this may not be the right forum.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, before we do that, we need to have a confidentiality contract. But of course, these recordings are shared. So maybe if you have got an example, maybe you can share it in such a way that it doesn't reveal the client.
Yes.
Make it as an example of something that happens.
Because
Whilst you're thinking,
it does feel like a hangover sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
whilst you're thinking,
Well,
and we can come back to this because it's
yes,
great.
Virginia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a wider context question because I think I get into the wider context.
Okay.
And we're going to do group supervision, and we want to work on people who are team coaches. How many people in the world are actually trained as team coaches? But then how many people in the world are working with groups?
Yes.
So how much are we being totally siloed into saying we must focus on team coaches? Why? I just want to throw it out there. Do we want to expand this into facilitators, trainers, things like that? Because they're having the same dynamics, but they're not having maybe the same impact because team coaching is so impacting and emergent and things like that.
Mm.
So I don't know if I can throw that out
Yeah.
there, but because I'm even thinking how nice would it be to offer, team supervision, but team. Are you working with teams? So I've worked with sport coaches, for example, and used super coaching supervision, and it was hugely, hugely impacting.
Yes, I
So
can imagine.
yeah.
I think my response to that is was something about calling it a different name, because I think a name does matter, and there's a lot of conflation of what people call things at the moment. So there's people out there running team development workshops where they've got a complete design, a whole day, 2-day workshop. But really, would you ever go in and coach a one-to-one client and go, at 2 o'clock, we're going to do a check-in. At 2:10, we're going to do an assessment exercise. And then we'll debrief it from 2:30 to 2:45. And then we'll take away some tools and exercises. No, because that changes the dynamic. It changes the ownership. It changes the possibility of what can emerge. And as a coach, you're already channeling the client's attention and awareness in a direction. You're trying to control where the tree drops, as a beautiful metaphor that somebody gave us last week. Whereas in facilitation, often it's more about getting to an outcome. The facilitator makes the process easy. Let's say you've got a team or a group who want to come to a collective vision for the next period of the organization. They don't want to have to worry about the process. They just need to get the vision. And a facilitator is amazing for that because they smooth out the process. Whereas with a team coach, we're making the invisible visible. We're looking to open Pandora's box and surface what's wanting to be there. So these are very different intents. And if you call it team coaching, then is it privileging team coaching and minimizing group coaching, or minimizing facilitation? So that's what occurred to me, Virginia, is maybe it's OD supervision or change supervision or something like that. A broad brush. Organizational development supervision is what I mean by OD. Yeah, I do think it's possible and some of the same skills. But I also think it's really important to be clear on your role and your intent. Because that shapes how you intervene, that shapes how you make meaning of what you see. And that could get kind of jumbled up. And at the moment, there could be a parallel process as well, because I think the market's very jumbled up. There's because team coaching is sort of hip at the moment, there's a lot of people calling their interventions team coaching when they're doing other things. You know, I'm sure very useful things, but different things. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, no, and just to build on that, George, I think that as far looking at it through the lens of a supervisor, Virginia, I think it's as long as everybody, as long as everybody knows and agrees, then I think it's absolutely fine to open it up, to open up your supervision to not just team coaches, but to include people that work in team development in other kind of capacities, whether that is as trainers or facilitators, or because some of the dynamics and some of the emotional impact that we've been describing they'll be very, very familiar with. Yeah.
And the individual's own patterns of self.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something for me in a mixed group about really seeing how different group members see their role. What's the role they put first on their business card? They may include others, but what's their identity? Yeah. Good. So one of the examples that has come up often is some schools of team coaching are very strong on teaching about the commission, about the context, and taking a outside in, future back approach. So the coach can normalize, for example, doing interviews with team stakeholders quite early on. That has a lot of complexity, because if the container of the team is not well enough built, it can fracture the team. But it's also, I think, part of our natural human desire to get to clarity, to get to something concrete. And I think this is the big stinky fish on the table in team coaching, is there is no such thing, in my view, as clarity or anything concrete. The commission is the commission at the moment that the conversation was had about the commission. But give it a week, 2 weeks, a month, it's usually changed. Because in one-to-one coaching and individual development, I'm working often with my own patterns, my own script, what's inside of me. In team coaching, the landscape is constantly changing. A team member leaves, new team members come in, the team leader changes. One moment the organization is going to be sold, or there's a change of government policy and that changes what's important, or there's a crisis. It's a constantly moving. It's like in an ocean that's calm one moment and then raging seas the next. And how they see their purpose as a team and what their commission actually is constantly changing. So I find that there's a need for coaches to get used to the discomfort of not working with concrete, not being able to pin things down. And if you're used to working with a tight brief, that can be quite tricky. Not trying to always work with stakeholder interviews, for example. Don't formalize a process. Really get in and understand the team and the context first.
And I really like what Brian said in the chat here, that there may be a bit of a sliding scale. In other words, there may be a bit of like in a relay race, a handing over of the baton at one point. And by the baton, I mean, you may, as a team coach, even a team coach who likes to work emergently and to really be with what is here and now, you may want to offer some structure up front, because we know that jumping in at the deep end of the pool is not conducive to creating psychological safety, but offering a bit of structure up front is. And so, yes, Brian, if I read your comment correctly, I think what you're saying is that let's offer some structure up front, but then as time goes by, let's hand that capacity to structure, let's hand that over to the team that we're working with, so that we can kind of withdraw from that role.
Yeah.
Is that yeah, I see you nodding. That more or less what you, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I've sure made the mistake and taken that to supervision, of working with a team, and not my client, so to speak, but one of those clients that comes through a third party, one of these coaching kind of brokers that says, you know, I need you to show up at that time, because here's a quick description of the team that you'll be working with, and I would ask, is it team coaching? Yeah, it's team coaching, absolutely, all right. And so, you know, first session with the team, and asking something rather silly like, okay, so what is it that you guys want to talk about? You know, what's important to you right now, right here? And completely losing them in that first session, feeling, as some of you mentioned in the chat earlier, feeling completely out of control, feeling that I was doing everything wrong, because all I got back was blank stares, and people, you know, team members looking at me and very clearly expressing that, well, surely you're the expert here. You should tell us what we're supposed to be talking about. You're going to take us through a process, right? So that structure and bringing something to a team coaching engagement, no matter how emergent, I think is important. I hope I'm not confusing it too much now, but yeah.
Yeah. So how does your supervisee, how does the coach see their role? What's their role maybe at the beginning of an assignment? And how do they come to that idea about what their role is? Are there a lot of shoulds in there, for example? Or is that coming from their reading of the team and from the system, their felt sense? Is it coming from armor? Oftentimes I find an over preparation very common in team coaches. Some spend hours and hours and hours preparing for a coaching session, and actually what they're really doing, people say, oh, I spend days preparing and then I just jettison it at the beginning. Well, it could take a lot of pressure and exhaustion off themselves by understanding where that pattern comes from. Yeah, what's behind that pattern of over preparation? So I think what we're really saying is delve into more complexity rather than trying to find solutions, and delve deeper. Elsie, there's a comment here that you've put, you know, the team often has no idea what team coaching is. Yeah, because you know, you think about it with one-to-one coaching, it's now over 30 years. I started in 1993 and coaching already existed. So it's had a long time to mature, and buyers know what it is. We know some of the principles. It's not about doing two. It's the client's work to do. We trust the process. We know these things. It wasn't like that at the start. People were saying to me, our senior execs didn't get to where they are today needing coaching, like it was some kind of insult. But the markets changed, and certainly in the UK and in a lot of the States and around the world, most execs in corporates have experienced coaching at some level. It's phenomenal, really, when you think about it. But how many have experienced team coaching in a pure form, when you're not coming in and teaching them a model and processing through a model and identifying a gap to show where they're faulty and offering them something to fix the gap? Very few. They may believe they've experienced coaching, and what they've had is a workshop developing a team charter or talking about their team purpose or talking about their working agreements. That's useful stuff, but it's not team coaching. It may be part of what a coach offers. So there's really something there about meeting the team where they're at, not expecting just to describe or contract. Sometimes people think, oh, I just need to explain the role and contract. Because we don't understand a role just by being told what a role is, by being given a description. We learn through encounter. So I'm a big fan of meeting the client where they're at and gradually transitioning. So if they say, yes, we've had team coaching before, then let's explore what that means to them. What happened? What was the coach's role? Maybe that's where we begin the work. I might say, what did you value about that? What would be different? What would make the work more impactful? That gives us some good ground to start with. But again, as I say, all too often at the moment, team coaches are taking a brief from one person and designing a workshop and getting straight in the room and delivering it. So that might be a big part of the work with your team coaching supervisees.
I like, I also wanted to thank Chaya for a comment in the chat here about, yes, a very important notion in coaching in general, right? That the coachee is an expert at being the coachee. I mean,
yeah,
we're not an expert of the we're not the expert. The client is the expert, and of course that holds in one-on-one coaching and transfers to team coaching, because it's called team coaching for a reason, right? I mean, it's still coaching. So and this is very true too when you look at the ICF team coaching competencies and stuff. They're built on coaching competencies. But this being said, we like to talk sometimes, don't we, George, about the pools on the team coach. It's that feeling of being pulled into playing. Yeah, into being something or showing up in a certain way that you're not really prepared to do, but because of the uncertainty, you give into it. And one of the pools is very clearly is the pool to be the expert, especially when there is a question from the team of what are the we want to become a high performing team. What's the first step we need to take to become a high performing team? Now, if you are, as Chaya frames it, if you're front of the room, that's a lot of that's. And one useful way to think about these, or one possible reframe, about thinking about these pools is to say, okay, well, if I feel pulled, to do something, whether it's to get up, but maybe I feel pulled to go up to the flip chart, or help people organize their thoughts, or maybe I feel pulled to help the team make an important decision, and so I've got my post-it notes and my colored pens and all that. Whatever pull you feel is an indication of what's missing in the team's capacity. Whatever pull you feel, whatever role you feel pulled to play, is a clear indication of something that's missing in the team's capacity. So it's data. And so that then becomes one way to play with it and go, what might, so what does a good team look like to you? Because of course there's the answers to what a high performing team looks like. The answers are a dime a dozen, right? Everybody's got their opinion on, the seven habits of highly effective teams, or the 10 characteristics of top performing teams. But what is it to this? What does it mean to you? What does it look like to you? And then put that expertise kind of, back.
I'd like to share one example and
sure,
hear from others examples. One of the really common ones I find is the energy's dropped. I feel the energy's dropped.
As you're working with the team, right?
So working with the team.
Yeah.
And I found, many coaches feel responsible for shifting the energy. Let's shift the energy. So the energy's dropped, let's lift it. Let's do an energizer, or let's get up and move around. Let's do something to shake up the energy. And often what we're doing at that moment is we're trying to change the system. We're filling the void. We're providing a solution. The problem is energy. Therefore, let's bring energy. But in that moment, we might be moving the client away from contact, the client team away from contact with what's here, with what's wanting to express, with what energy is representing. And it's their work to do, the team's work to resolve, to become aware of energy. Energy is their creation. It's not my job as a coach to create energy. Because if I'm the bringer of energy, then I've got to bring it all the time. The thing about coaching is it's more about what happens between sessions. So if I'm the bringer of energy, have I got to be with them all the time to constantly bring up, energizers and lifted up, if they become aware of what's happening in their energy, then they can learn what it might mean, or to name it, or to shift it, or identify the need. That's a good, classic sort of example of a void. So yeah, what's pulling you? Tim said. What's pulling you is what the team's missing.
So I just wrote that really quickly. So it was just going off the back of what you said, Allard, which is when I get a sense of being pulled, it's because the team is missing that.
Yeah.
And you've spoken to that a bit there, Georgina, by verbalizing it. What's bringing awareness to the team of what's going on. I'm personally working on that at the moment because of a couple of hangover things that I've had going on. And I'm curious as to how you verbalize it to get the team to be aware of it. Just like to hear your experience.
Right. Do you want to go to that, Al?
Well, yeah. Yeah, so Tim, I wish this was one of okay, so the answer is on page 36 kind of questions, and we're all looking for the formula, right, on how to do this. But again, every context, every situation is completely different. I think the underlying idea is, to shift that responsibility back and to create some awareness around it. I think again, some of the language that we like to use where, at Team Coaching Studio is not so much that the language of a change agent, but more the language of an awareness agent. Because transformation starts with awareness, right? Awareness that leads to choice, and choice hopefully leads to change and all that. But so it's an opportunity to create some awareness. And we know how to do that as coaches, right? We create, we help, we serve. We're at the service of awareness through sharing what the impact of something is on us, and or by maybe asking a question and then seeing how that, and seeing how things land and everything. So in the case of what was my example in the case of
energy dropping was one of them.
Say again.
The one I was talking about was
energy dropping. Yeah. So all right. So so put yourself in the, think of yourself as an awareness agent. So, I noticed my energy dropping right now. Does anybody else feel that? And maybe, two people in the team raise their hand and say, yeah, I kind of feel that too. And then you could say, all right, why could, almost like a fishbowl, kind of little fishbowl, would the two of you have a conversation about your experience right now and how you experience that lowering of energy? Have a conversation together while the rest of the team listens in. And then you say, and how does that land with the rest of the team? That's just one way.
Yeah.
And then of course, what do you want to do with that?
Yeah.
So I've done that. And what happens is I get half the team going, yeah, well, what's going on for me is X, Y, and Z. And then the other team goes, what are you talking about?
Yeah. So then you've got awareness of what, Tim, in that moment?
What have I got awareness of in that moment? That I've got a disconnect from some of the team, or less awareness in themselves as individuals, and an opportunity to bring them together.
Yeah. So where I might go with that is yeah. So I notice as a team, you're in two different places around this. Some of you are really noticing the energy drop. Others are going, yeah, hell what? What do you do with that as a team? Because difference exists all the time. Where do you normally go with this? What do we do with this now? To the ones who are, it's nothing. Does that voice win? Or the quieter voice? This is how you work with it.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It's data.
Yeah.
But where many coaches go to, Tim, is, oh, my intervention didn't land. I didn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's really common. And something that took me a long time to learn was really to have this, you know, when I go, it's all data. It's creating a bit of space between subject and object. The space between subject and object. So I can go, oh, isn't that interesting? What happened there? I can keep accountability with them, because your team system in that example has just revealed a bit more of itself. What was invisible has become more visible. What was noticed first was energy drop. You inquired, a bit more was revealed. Team are in two different places. We don't know what they're in different places about because we haven't pulled on that example. But there's a dynamic there, two different places. And that leads to a choice. How's this team going to choose? Does it go to the leader to choose? Does it go to you as the coach to choose or to back off? Does it go to the loudest voice in the room? Yeah. And these are the dynamics that you've just encountered are likely to be happening all the time in this team, in meetings. So by revealing it and working at what we call at the point of contact, the team are learning how to resource themselves in their normal working environment when they're not in the same place energetically in this example. And the other thing I'd do, Tim, that I think is incredibly helpful myself is normalizing it. Because, you know, how many of us are here? 20 of us here, maybe 10 of us with cameras on. If we were all having a conversation and trying to decide something, let's say, without any norms here, because we're a new group, we would have a similar dynamic going on, possibly a parallel process going on, because it can be frustrating not knowing what the norms are, and we want somebody to bring them and tell us how we're going to make these decisions. That would be here. So we can always bring it into an experiment. And this is a strong way we work. We call it a unit of work, Tim. So we've let's stay with this theme because it's alive here at the moment. Let's say energy's dropped. We've noticed it. We've got the team in two different places. Then instead of going to content or to energy, we can create an experiment around difference and say, I noticed the teams in two different places. Let's have an experiment for the next X minutes. Depends on how big your container is. Next 10 minutes, for example. Try exploring between you how you can come into alignment. Do you need to differ more first and understand what's behind this? Do you want to vote? You know, how are you going to go through this difference into something useful, into alignment? I'll just observe, and I can offer you my observations, and we'll see how it goes. And then after the experiment, you can say, so what did you notice? What happened there? What worked? What didn't work? So we don't need to bring anything in. It's all there. It's like the clay is already on the potter's wheel. And it's all happening.
And in that sense, team coaching is very different from team facilitation, right? Because the facilitator would jump in and say, oh, I've got to manage this team's process because things are getting off the rails. And if there's now disagreement and, you know, whether do we need a break now, or can we wait another half hour for a break? If I don't solve that for them, then we're never going to get this thing done that I'm getting paid to help them get done, right? Yeah. And so as a supervisor, you'll jump in and manage process. As a team coach, you realize that the team's process is sacrosanct and is very much the responsibility of the team itself. Because if you start to take responsibility for the team's processes, you undermine any and all possibility that they have for relevant transformational change.
Yeah, so
but it's hard work, Tim. It's hard work, and again, that's why we're talking about supervising team coaches and team coaches needing supervision so much. Oh God, again, I was going to say something and slipped my mind now.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
no.
it may come back. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We've been battling the flu the last few days.
You have, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. So normalizing is very helpful. I think that, you know, no group of people coming together knows how to do we. I mean, some of us barely know how to do I. Yeah, that can be a hard enough learning journey, can't it? But to do we is a challenge. So normalizing it, they don't feel they should know how to work through energy, for example. But the learning is in the opportunity in the coaching room to learn, to experiment, discover, and to find their own way. And the nice thing is it takes pressure off you as a coach, because you don't need to, you know, like Al was talking about decision making. I've seen many coaches in that example saying, okay, how I see some people think it's red, some people think the answer is blue, some people think the answer is green. They put those in the red, blue, and green up on a flip chart and give them voting dots. Well, if we give them voting dots straight away, we're imposing a decision-making norm that the majority is the one that wins. So that may come from the coach's need to solve something or bring something. That's what a facilitator does. So just normalizing it and saying, well, this is different. You know, if you all come in a room together and you don't know each other, you haven't got any code about how we're going to resolve difference. Let's work with that. That's so useful for you as a team. Yeah.
Tim, I just remembered what I was going to say. Silly old fart that I am. But I was going to bring in, I just want to underline the notion of contracting. You know, what is the contract between you and the team? And I think it's so, I think 8 times out of 10, when something goes wrong in team coaching, it's due to a lack of contracting. And again, there's only so much you can contract for up front, but there's a lot of these little moments that happen as the work is underway, where you need to step in again and say, is it okay that I don't try to solve this for you? Because if I do, I'm not doing you the service that I'm meant to be doing you. I see my role as slightly differently. So contracting for your role, I think, is super key. And keep contracting for your role along the way. And then I was just going to, yes, somebody said it requires a lot of honesty, mentions the Abilene paradox. You know, there's many things that happen in teams, and especially if there's disagreement at one point, there may be a lot of confluence just to, let's just pretend we agree on something because this is taking too much time. Things are moving too slow. We still have so much stuff to get through and to do. So confluence can be a real enemy and can real data to work with as a team coach. You know, how do we overcome that? Again, in service of real transformational change. And then there was one question I just wanted to jump on, which is from Tuli. Is team coach supervision just advising the coach or supporting the coach in their awareness? And I think in that sense, there isn't much difference between coaching one-on-one coaches and supervising individual coaches and supervising team coaches. I think it's always going to be a mix of one of the other things that I remember from my study days at ICCS was I love this formative, normative, restorative model. And so I think your supervision work with team coaches is going to be a mix of that. If it were only advising, then I think you'd be maybe mentoring a team coach, which is fine too. And so it goes back a bit to that difference between mentoring and supervision. And I'm sure you've all thought about that at length. But so if you remember the formative, normative, restorative. So formative is really the development of the way I remember it. And Mia, I hope I'm doing the work justice, but supporting the development of capacities. Normative has to do more with the ethics and the boundaries of your role as a coach, and the ethical codes that you adhere to. And then the restorative has to do more with the emotional containment. I remember, Mia, you had a beautiful analogy. I think it was about going to the spa, or I remember something like that.
Yeah, it's my personal metaphors for supervision. So I would say that your normative function might be your workout with the personal trainer. And then your restorative function might be your massage from the physiotherapist.
Right.
And your formative function might be the nutritious meal that's prepared for you by the chef. And I came to those because early on in my supervision training was reading a lot of metaphors like teacher and security guard and nurse. And none of them were kind of harmful, but they were these benign authority figures, and that didn't sit really well with what I thought supervision should be about. So yeah, that idea of taking yourself and your practice to a metaphorical health spa was just my way of putting it across.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, and so when you look at that, the formative, and the normative, and the restorative, again, where would you picture yourself doing a lot of supervision work with team coaches? And of course, the answer is all three. And of course, the answer is, yeah, I'll do a bit of advising and I'll do some raising awareness. But in light of everything we've been talking about today, a lot of formative work, a lot of normative work, or a lot of restorative work. What do those poor team coaches need? Julie, maybe you want to have a stab at an answer or a response.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was also thinking about the question earlier there in the chat, that who is the client in team coaching supervision, the team or the coach. And yeah, I was just pondering these. And another thing I was thinking also, that it's about the last discussion here, that also as a team coach, you choose and commit and agree to use some kind of methodologies or techniques or tools or something with the group beforehand when you structuralize it. And it kind of affects how the situation experienced. So it's not only just jumping into the empty room and having a question in there, which would be art of hosting thing, like let's be here and let's have what emerges. But then these techniques and methodologies affect how we work together as a team. So this is I'm just putting it in the air, that how much this affects the coach's work.
So is there a new question there, Julie?
I was just pondering, just offering the idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's not just empty room with the question, which is a very lovely idea. But how many times in contracting, your clients want to know what tools and methodologies are used, and you need to adjust.
I remember a few years ago, I was reading a lovely book by Claire Pedrick, which is called Simplifying Coaching. And she talks about sometimes these intervention processes as a string of things. And so the idea that I took away from that is almost like when you work with teams, you could think of it as when you go to the old-fashioned butchers and you buy sausages, and you have a sausage and there's a little string that's strung to the next sausage and the next. So you've got this. And I think it's useful to think of that. And of course, vegetarians might need a better metaphor, but the work that we end up doing with teams, maybe one of those sausages is pure team coaching, but maybe another one of those sausages is to do a bit of training, and maybe another sausage will be a bit of facilitation. And sometimes this is always the risk, right? When we learn something new, that it becomes the new tool that we want to apply to any and all kind of situations that we're faced with. And of course, that's never the case. And so in supervision, I get team coaches who come to me with, the day before the supervision, they'll send me a 3-page outline of the work that they're going to be doing over one day with the team. It's a completely kind of written out structure with an agenda and the timings that Georgina mentioned. And my stretch for them is always, okay, well, where in there are you going to find the opportunity to do some emergent work, to really hone in on what's happening here and now? Change only happens here and now, right? And if we're too attached to a preordained kind of structure, we miss the opportunities to do meaningful work in the here and now. So yeah, so that's a real mantra for the team coach, the emergent team coach is here and now. Let's stay here and now. What's happening now? How is whatever dynamic you're showing, how is it showing up here and now? Not let's not talk too much about what happened last week or what's going to happen next week. How is it manifesting here and now?
And thank you. This is very, very, very impactful and important idea. This what you're doing, this emergent team coach. I personally have different kind of not approach, but education, like which is that okay, the big things happens outside of the room, not now. So this is really interesting. I love this idea, emergent team coach.
Yeah.
Orbit.
Yeah, and I don't think the two ideas are mutually exclusive. I'm with you 100% when you say that that change happens in between the different coaching sessions that we have with people. Absolutely.
However, as a supervisor, listening to you talk about different lenses, it makes me think about exploring what's your philosophy of change. What do you believe is your role? And that's very significant in terms of how we shape our work as a coach. If we believe that the most important work is what happens outside of the room, then that's where we'll be, that will shape the questions that you're asking your supervisee, where you're directing their attention. If you believe relationally that all change is possible in the here and now, it begins inside. It's an inside out experience. That's where your lens is going to go. And many coaches, I think, are not necessarily so clear on their philosophy because they've gone to a school and learned a toolkit. I love to do constellations, let's say, and this is the process by which you do constellations, but maybe lose contact with what's the real underpinning philosophy behind that work. How might you flex that approach to work differently? So I think it can be very helpful to work with supervisees to help them, that critical reflexivity, to help them unpack their view of change. Similarly with, what do you believe is the role of leadership in a team? What do you believe is the role of team member? What's the work of a team? What are your beliefs, like Al said earlier on, about power? Many coaches I find have a preference, maybe if we had a bell-shaped curve, a norm in coaching around power, we might find more people on the side of the curve that was around consensus. Let's get all the voices in. Let's make sure everybody agrees. That's not always possible in organizational life, nor may it be what the team or the team leader or the organizational system works, depending on how their power and authority works in their system. So having a space where coaches can become more aware of their lens, not so that you can change their lens, but so they can work with that awareness. Then they're not coaching a client out of awareness of their desire to shape the team in their own mold. So ultimately, I think much of team coaching supervision is vertical development.
Right. Yeah.
What was
Yeah,
that?
no, I was just going to say that what a beautiful point to conclude on today, because if we talk about that formative part in the formative narrative story, yes, there is formative work, but the real formative work is vertical development. How do we help a team coach become more comfortable with paradox, and how do we help them become more comfortable with not knowing? How do we help them look at things through different lenses? How do we help them adopt a different worldview, a different philosophy, perhaps, or at least expand that? That's all vertical development. The team coaching supervision is a lot less about bringing in new tools.
Yeah.
Tools are nice. We all have our favorite go-to tools. They come in handy sometimes, but all tools will eventually fail, especially in working with teams. There's no tool so good that it works every time with everyone. Things are so different from one team to the next, so complex that
what we do have is ourselves as an intervener.
Yes,
and
you are the tool.
Our awareness, you're the tool, and the team is the content.
Ooh, you're the tool and the team is the content.
Yeah, we don't need to bring content from the outside.
That's what we should have called this talk today. You're the tool and the team is the content. What do you mean by the team is the content?
I mean that I think often where learning starts is we want the model. So let's use the 5 dysfunctions of team, because a lot of people have heard of that. So that becomes the content. I'm going to teach you the model, convince you of the framework, maybe even measure you against the framework, and then give you exercises to explore the framework. So therefore, I've built an agenda because it's around the content, the framework. And then I'm playing a different role. If the team is the content, then we're saying, let's trust the process. Everything we need is here, is in the room, because we're working with a living system. And if we become more aware of what's here, build up, take the armor off, the armor of tools and processes and plans and structures, and learn to work with what's here, the system will reveal itself. We don't even need a diagnostic tool to tell us there's a lack of psychological safety. For example, in a team, the moment you enter the field and work with the team, you'll start to feel that. You'll notice it in the interactional patterns. It's here. And the rest is often clutter or armor. And of course, coaches are not going to want to take that armor off, empty out the rucksack full of tools overnight. So it's where are they in their developmental journey? What's the learning edge? And we discover that by finding out what's going on inside them. What's their meaning-making frame? What's their philosophy? Where do they bump into themselves? What are the pulls that they get pulled into? What gets triggered? What's beneath the surface? By going inside can help in a development for outer transformation. And I think it's very difficult to do that without the support of a great supervisor. It's quite difficult to do that just inside ourselves. We need some prompts, some questions, to explore those different lenses.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much. I noticed we're at the bottom of the hour.
Yeah.
So,
thank you for joining us here.
Yeah, do stay in touch. We'll George, could you share the were you going to share that PDF with? Well, see, we didn't share many slides. I don't think there's any slides that you haven't seen before. Really, we can put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just popping it in the chat. And,
if anybody wants to follow up one-on-one, I put a link to my Calendly in the always up for a chat. Probably in the new year.
Yeah.
But always up for a chat, and but we're also Georgina at Team Coaching Studio and or Allard at teamcoachingstudio.com. Easy to get hold of.
Thank you for listening to us today.
Yeah, and pitching in.
And pitching in, and we hope to meet you again. Happy supervising.
Have a wonderful holiday, everyone.